he done that? Now his bishop is the right color. He goes c3. White has to go king e3 here. King e3. He doesn't see a move. He's taken. But is this a win? No, he's lost on time. White's lost on time. I think this is winning for black, though, because the bishop is the right color. The promotion square is a light square, and so is the bishop. My goodness, what a game. And we have a couple of games left. Badur Jabava trying to convert a queen versus rook endgame against FIDE Master Stellario. Queen b1 and queen a2 would win a rook. Yeah, queen a2, and the game is over. Badur winning his second game. And that was the final game of round 2. Round 3 is coming up in just a moment. Still no major upsets. I mean, Hikaru, Jose, Dubov, Caruana, Hayek, Martirosyan, they've all won their games. But round 3, they're mostly facing off against 2700s. Hikaru playing the big boss 04. That's Gabriel Cardoso, FIDE Master from Colombia. Very strong blitz player, but he's currently not making a move. And there he goes, d4. So we're going to start by looking at Hikaru's game. We're going to circle around and see some of the top games as well. Let's see. Bishop c4, a6. Hikaru adopting a modern setup. And this transitions into a hippo. He fianchettos both of his bishops, and d6, e6 is generally how black handles this. A pretty good opening for blitz. You can make a lot of moves fast, and not an easy setup to crack. That bishop on c4, whoa, h4. What a committal move, especially because white has castled on that same side of the board. And I think white's going to regret this. Hikaru goes g5, and he says, hey, if you're going to go h4, I'm going to start attacking you. Now, if white captures, then the h file is opened, and black can just get a mating attack there pretty quickly. So I really dislike the choice to play h4 and castle on the same side of the board. White goes h5 to keep things close, but this pawn is now a weakness, and Hikaru immediately attacks it. Generally, the knight goes to e7 in these lines, but here Hikaru develops to f6 in order to put pressure on the h file. A nice move by white. Knight back to h2 so that the queen can defend the pawn. Hikaru strikes in the center, maybe just bishop d3. I don't think white is worse here by any means, but a pretty dubious opening setup by white. We have a trade on e4. I like the way that white has handled this in the last few moves. Knight h2 is a very nice move. That knight could come to g4 later in the game. And the move f4 here has to be considered by white to open up the f file and try to get an attack going on that f file. And he plays it. Good stuff by Cardoso here. He's playing aggressively, and that's how you need to play. You need to take it to the top, guys. Okay, g takes f4, bishop takes f4. What an exciting position. Will Hikaru trade his very good knight for the bishop? He does, and I think Hikaru is preparing to castle queenside. But one thing he has to be careful about, if he castles queenside, he might drop that a6 pawn, which is being aimed at by white's queen and bishop. So which way is Hikaru going to castle? Is he going to keep his king in the center? And how is he going to fix the problem of the a6 pawn if he wants to castle queenside? Because if he goes a5, then he creates a pretty big weakness on the b5 square. So I don't know exactly how Hikaru is going to untangle his pieces. For the time being, the king is pretty safe in the center, but white potentially threatens rook takes f7 and bishop g6. That's a pretty scary idea that black has to keep track of. So we'll keep an eye on this game. Let's take a look at some of the other top games. We have Fabiano Caruana, who faces off against Promen 1999. That's Grandmaster Benjamin Gladura, Hungarian Grandmaster, very, very strong player. Fabi with a very pleasant position, though. He's got his bishops fianchettoed. He's got a good center. f5 is potentially coming. This looks pretty good for black. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so bishop c8. How about bishop takes f6 and knight d5? Fabi definitely with a better position. And let's see how he continues the central pressure. I mean, e5 is possible. Let's see. He's thinking the pawn on e4 is hanging. He has to defend it. How is he going to defend it? He goes e5. Here we go. He pushes the pawn. Now, black could sacrifice the exchange on e5, but that looks a little bit dubious because that walks right into a discovery down the e file. But now, I wanted to say Magnus. Interesting mistake there. Caruana going to get his knight to d5. The question here is whether he can keep this e5 pawn alive, because black is attacking it from 4 different directions. He goes knight d5. Black's going to move his queen back to b8. This is very, very exciting. Very sharp position. Let's check out some of the other top games. We've got Daniel Dubov playing against a Polish international master. Dubov definitely much better as well. So favorites look pretty good as well. But back to Hikaru's game, because Hikaru is in big trouble. He did end up castling queenside and dropping that a6 pawn. So white is up a healthy extra pawn, And white is much better here. This is not fun for Hikaru. He's down a pawn. He's got nothing to show for it. White has this nice knight on e5. Now, I think Hikaru should be able to hold a draw here because that's just what he does. And he often wins these types of positions, but this is a potential upset in the works. The time situation is equal as well. Whoa, 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 whoa. That was apparently a big mistake. Why exactly? So takes, and a5 looks pretty good here as well. Breaking down black's king side, but white drops the knight back to d3. A little bit passive, but at least white is attacking the e6 pawn. This is a very precarious situation for Hikaru. He's actually up 2 pawns. Oh, I miscounted. No, he's up 2 pawns. I didn't even know how he won the second one. White is up 2 full pawns, and this is huge trouble for Hikaru. Queen f3. We have a queen trade, but how is black going to win this h-pawn? If he goes knight f6, then white defends it with knight g3. Hikaru trying to get his bishop to d6, and then he wants to go knight f6. I don't know about that queen trade from white's perspective. I feel like that's given black more practical chances, but white definitely is not in any danger of losing this game. The only question is, can Hikaru hold a draw 2 pawns down? Okay, so king b6, defending c5. White's got the 2 extra pawns on the queen side, gets his king up to f2. This is really close. Hikaru has to be very, very precise in order to hold that draw. By the way, Dubov is going to win his game. Fabi, I think, is also winning. Knight out to e5. Knight f4 by Hikaru, attacking h5. Knight g6. Oh, what a move! Forcing the knight trade. Forcing the trade of knight for bishop, and c4 wins a piece. Hikaru's going to lose. c4 is the game-winning move, and Hikaru resigns, and Cardoso crushing Hikaru in round 3 of Title Tuesday. That's just what happens. What a game by the Colombian youngster. Very, very strong blitz player. I've had my struggles against him, and now so has Hikaru. But you might remember Hikaru got off to a slow start in the first Title Tuesday. He is incredibly good at coming back from these early defeats. So the tournament's not over. Many more rounds to go, but a shocking result in round 3. But Caruana now, is he in trouble as well? I think Fabi's somehow in trouble as well. He's got 2 pieces for a rook, but black's rook is coming into e2 with tremendous effect. The time situation was really lopsided, but now Fabi's time is evaporating as well. Rook e2 check, king takes g7. No, this is simply worse for white. Black's f-pawn is marching forward to f5 as well. This is really dangerous for white. Fabi dropping his rook back to f2. In the event of a rook trade, white's going to have trouble keeping his queenside pawns alive. From a blitz perspective, this is a really difficult position for white. a3, Fabi trying to keep his pawns alive. Gladura is hunting for them. But now this gets very sharp, because if white can get a pass pawn here, then the entire landscape of the position changes. And if you take on a3, white takes on c5. I think this is actually now starting to get really good for Fabi, but I think Gladura took the wrong pawn. Now Fabi's c-pawn is just marching forward. Fabi's going to win. Fabi's going to win. He's going to go c7, c8. You can't stop the pawn. It's over. 2 pieces up. Fabi might need to mate with knight and bishop against king, but with the 1-second increment, he's going to have no problem doing that. Something went terribly wrong there for Gladura as he allowed Fabi to get a pass pawn. But again, time scrambles, anything is possible. This should be a very easy win. And what's more, Fabi doesn't even have to give away his h-pawn. He won't even have to checkmate with knight and bishop unless Gladura can get his king to h3, which he's trying to do, and he will do it. So we're going to see Fabi checkmating with knight and bishop. That's quite the treat. You always wonder, do these GMs know their basics? Yes, they do. Oh, Gladura trying to do a dirty move there. And Fabi, he's got a great arrangement of pieces right off the bat. And yeah, bishop b3, this is easy. This is actually really easy because he's basically got the king in the right corner already. King g3, I mean, anything is mating. He's got the king in the right corner. This is a very, very easy mate. Okay, so Fabi's going to win his game. Let's check into Alexander Bortnyk's game. Knight f2, knight h3, and bishop b5. Gladura resigning. Bortnyk is about to beat Gadim Baile. I mean, whoa! Knight takes d4. What's that? Whoa! What's going on? Holy smokes! What was that? That was unbelievable. Rook takes f4 and white is winning. Rook takes f4, king g2, and white is winning. Was that a mouse slip? But instead, white missing mate. And then on the move before, Bortnyk that rook's hanging. Rook on d4 is hanging. What a ridiculous stretch there. We're back to Jababa's game. Jababa's about to lose as well. That was ridiculous. I mean, they both had time. They had like 6-7 seconds. What was that? Alexander Bortnyk counting his lucky stars there. This should be a win for white. But Jababa has found a way to get his king to the right spot. He's about to lose on time. Can Jababa keep himself afloat? What does he have to avoid here? He has to avoid giving the wrong check so that white can interpose with check. I don't know if Jababa's going to hold this. He's coming down to 0.3 seconds on every move. White needs to find a way to interpose with check. And because white has 2 extra pawns, white can actually sacrifice one of these pawns if that means getting into a winning pawn endgame. Let's see. Jababa, for the time being, he keeps giving checks. He keeps holding it together. He's up to 3 seconds. Will Jababa hold a draw here? Okay, queen h1 check, queen h2, queen c1, queen e5. Oh, black could have taken that, I think. Oh, no, he couldn't have. Okay, now g6. Oh, but stalemate! Stalemate! Queen h3 or queen h2, and Dubov sees it immediately. What an idea. Beautiful. Queen takes g2. And because the king is stalemated, it's an easy draw. You can even play queen f3 and take white's queen and go king f8. Amazing defense by Badur Dubov. He holds a big draw there. What a game. We've got Amon Hamilton still playing his game against Women's International Master Wisdom game. Not sure who that is. And Amon, he is definitely not better here. I think this is a draw. I don't think either side can make any progress with their kings. Wow, lots of action already in round 3. We've got Hikaru losing his game. We've got ridiculousness going on in Bortnyk's game. We've got Badur Dubov held to a draw. And I think Amon Hamilton is also going to be held to a draw. He's got a point, though. Amon already nicked for a full point in the previous round. Okay, they're going back and forth with their bishops. Etienne Bacrot also has 3 out of 3. Great performance. So most of the top guys still on 3 out of 3. Hikaru losing his game. That's the biggest upset of the round. And that was the last game of the round. Let's update the standings here. And as you can see, we've got Dulles, that's Dubov, Oparin, Ruud Makarian, very strong international master on 3 out of 3. So the next round has begun. We've got a matchup of the greats. We have Dubov Bacrot. We've got Keimer against Jose. And we've got lots of mouthwatering matchups. Let's start on Dubov Bacrot. Etienne Bacrot, very household name by now. He's played in a lot of these Grand Prix. He's very warmed up, and he's on 3 out of 3. Wonderful blitz player, very experienced. But I think Daniel Dubov, I mean, he's always a pre-tournament favorite. He's always hanging out at the top. Will he be able to? Is this his title Tuesday? We've got a Queen's Gambit accepted. Pretty comfortable for black here. And Dubov already taking his time deciding where to put the bishop. Let's see, he puts it on d3. And Etienne, yeah, definitely not the greatest performances in the FIDE Grand Prix. But on the plus side, he's warmed up. And in comparison to the people he's playing in the Grand Prix title Tuesday, might seem like a walk in the park. Currently on 3 out of 3. A4 by Dubov. Very typical move in such positions. He's trying to get Bacrot to weaken his king side. And, okay, I'm going to save the Bacrot jokes for later in this broadcast. Rook takes a4. This looks pretty pleasant for white. That rook can later swing to the other side of the board. A very Dubovian type of idea. Now, I think he's going to play b3, bishop b2. Fianchetto, his own bishop. That dark sword bishop needs to come out. Dubov taking his time. He's thinking about how he wants to arrange his queenside pieces. He starts by developing the knight to d2. Where is that knight going? Potentially c4, maybe to e4. This looks pretty equalish. Bacrot with a very comfortable, his type of position. Rook comes out to d8, putting pressure on that bishop on d3. Let's see what Dubov is going to do here. I mean, b3 to me seems pretty natural. b3, bishop b2. But I suppose he could also put a knight on b3 and then get his bishop out via d2. He goes knight e4, offering a trade of a bunch of minor pieces. This looks like it's heading toward a draw. I think Bacrot has a very solid position here, and looks like he's got everything under control. Let's switch to the Babazada Caruana game. Hazar Babazada, not to be underestimated. He might just only be an FM, but he's an incredibly strong blitz player. He had a great performance in some of the Bullet Chess Championship qualifiers. He's super fast. He's super tricky. And he's part of this young generation of Azerbaijani players who are really, really dangerous. And they've got quite the mentors in Mamedov and, of course, Shakir Mamedyarev. So Babazada, you can see his style here. G4, pushing a pawn on the same side that he's castled, stopping Fabiano from going f5. Very committal decision. Fabiano striking on the other side. Love the move a5. And this was missed by Babazada. Oh, this is trouble for white. Big trouble for white. White can't play c3 because it drops the pawn on d3. And if white doesn't play c3, how does white keep his queen side alive? B takes a5, allows rook takes a5. Now Fabiano's going to have the a file under control. Now, this looks pretty pleasant for black. And this move, g4, Fabiano could strike with h5 at some point. Even now, this move should be considered. White's king could end up being weak. Rook coming out to a2. Black is attacking on all sides. This looks really, really good for Fabiano. Let's see how Babazada holds his position together. Okay, so we've got a lot of other top games. We've got Bortnyk narrowly surviving the previous round. And here he plays Thomas Beardson. And whoa. He's already down to 30 seconds, and he's under huge attack. Queen is coming out to h4. Is Bortnyk getting checkmated here? Knight f3 tries to hold everything together. Man, this looks dangerous. Rook takes f3 has to be considered, but I think that probably white survives here. Queen h4, something like this. And there's mate on e8 that has to be watched out for. by black. Bishop b7, rook takes e4 is what Beardson settles on. But now Bortnyk is able to get his last piece out. And at the very least, we know that white's not getting checkmated anytime soon. Another thing to be very careful about, queen b3 is a potential fork against the king and the bishop. So if black goes queen d7, you drop the bishop after queen b3. Black has to go queen a8, and he does. And I still think Beardson has tremendous pressure on white's position. Rook through f1, and I think this is Beardson, by the way. I'll double check that after the game. And Aquila confirming that it is in fact Beardson. Okay, bishop back to h4. Rook can swing to f4, putting even more pressure down the f-file. 2 minutes for Beardson. 2-minute time advantage. No, I don't see Bortnyk pulling this one out, although we know he's capable of just about anything. Careful for Beardson now. If you go rook f5, you walk into another fork. I think he can go rook f7, but then maybe Bortnyk has knight g5. What if Bortnyk goes knight g5 here? Wait a second. Knight g5. Oh, rook takes f2, I think, is what Beardson is playing. He's playing a sacrifice on f2. He goes knight h4, does Bortnyk. But what about knight takes f2? I feel like knight takes f2 drops, snaps the pawn off the board, leads to a huge attack by white. This is looking really, really perilous for white. And 3 seconds left. I don't see Bortnyk pulling this one out. Knight drops back to e4. Now black is up a pawn. Ugh, this is disgusting for white. Okay. All right, where does black go from here, though? How does Beardson continue putting pressure on white's king? He's got the battery here. a5, he expands on the other side of the board. Bortnyk down to 0 seconds, got to move. Rook f1, trying to trade pieces, but even in the event of an endgame, black is up a pawn. So it's not like Beardson is too broken up about trading rooks. He gives the check on a6. White's king is still not out of the woods. This is looking worse and worse by the move, but for now, Bortnyk is holding on. Maybe his knight could come out to f5, get some activity against black's king. Things are going to start getting a little bit more complicated, so Beardson has to be precise here. And if he goes queen c4, Bortnyk might go queen b3 and trade queens, although I think even in the event of that endgame, black should still be able to win the game. So let's see. Beardson down to a minute. He goes back to f6. And here comes Bortnyk's knight into f5. Now white is threatening queen g5. White is actually creating some threats against black's king. Is Beardson getting a little nervous here? How do you stop queen g5? Now wait a minute. Bishop takes g2. There's your answer. Queen coming out to f1. Bortnyk gives a check on b3, trying to penetrate to b8. Uh-oh, white has definitely created more chances than Beardson should have allowed. How exactly is black going to navigate his way out of this? Knight takes g7, queen f1, king d2, and there are no more checks. Queen f1, king d2, and there are no more checks. Is Bortnyk going to save this game? This is unbelievable. After king takes g7, queen takes e8, we have opposite colored bishops on the board. And in the event of a queen trade, white should be able to hold a draw. This is what Bortnyk does. He saves these positions like there's no tomorrow. By the way, Daniel Dubov is going to defeat Etienne Bacrot. Bishop c1, and Dubov wins a piece. Bacrot made a blunder there toward the middle game. He's going to lose, and his streak comes to end. Fabiano with a crushing victory over Babazada, as we kind of expected from the opening. So we're watching here as Bortnyk has managed to get a queen trade, and he should be able to hold a draw. What an incredible save by Alexander Bortnyk. He's got a little bit of work to do, though. And bishop e1 is going to win the a5 one. And if anything, it's white who might be playing for a win. But here come Beardson's pawns. Still dangerous, then. No, that was an exaggeration. Bishop b6, king d5. White is still in a little bit of danger. That e-pawn rumbling down the board. e3, bishop b5 I would play to stop white's pawn from moving further. Bishop b5. But how does Beardson make progress? This c2 pawn is incredibly important. It's stopping black's d-pawn from moving. I just don't see a single way that Beardson can make progress. Or maybe bishop f5, though. Maybe bishop f5. Bortnyk finding the opportunity, going b4. No, this is a draw. Great save by Alexander Bortnyk. Let's swing to some of the other top games. We have Ariantari about to defeat Gabriel Cardoso, who, of course, had who had defeated Hikaru the previous round. That's just how it works. A couple of other games. We have Platy. That's Alain Pichot. He's up a full rook in his game. He's going to go to 3 out of 4. All of the top games, I think, have ended. We have one more top game, JC Ibarra against Rasmus Swane, who always does well in Title Tuesday, German Grandmaster, and Swane should be able to pull this game off. e4, e3, e2. The king is immune from a rook check. No, this is over. And Rasmus Swane is going to go to 4 out of 4. Great stuff once again by the German Grandmaster. This is a win for Swane, and we have Eric Rosen defeated by Becca 95. That's Alexander Indich. Just a couple of games remaining in round 4 of 11. We're watching the late Title Tuesday. Hikaru Nakamura taking the earlier tournament. We have Don Miguelis, national match for Portugal, against Actor Zhu. Chinese Grandmaster, and is this a win for black? Well, no, I think this is a draw, actually, because the moment... Wait, king takes a2, white blundering the pawn, now b3 is just winning. White should not have left the b-pawn. White should not have left the b-pawn alive, but wait a second, king takes c3, f3, knight d2, f2. Is this winning for white? The eval bar is showing a draw, but I don't understand why. No, this is winning for black. This is winning for black. I think the eval bar is taking a break. And white resigns. Apparently, it's showing a draw. But, king d3 is a draw. Oh my goodness, this is a draw. Because after b2, king e2, white is able to stop both pawns at the same time. This is absolutely ridiculous. b2, king e2, and this is a draw. I can't believe it. And white resigning in a drawn position, but I also thought that was losing. Okay, we have just 1 or 2 more games remaining. For some reason, black is slow rolling white, punishing him for not resigning. This is funny. Just don't mess with this too much or your internet might go down when you've got 2 seconds. Okay. All right, so this is game over. We have just 1 more game remaining. Bean screen, that's Zachary Tannenbaum, very strong blitz player, drawing wisdom game. And last game, Abund is about to defeat Mops 2004. 2 national masters. Abund is very strong. King g8, king g7, and h6, h7, h8. Okay. Yeah, that draw was crazy, but I also couldn't conceptualize that you could stop these 2 pawns. It looked like such a losing position. I missed it completely. But okay. Anyways, that concludes round 4, and there will be a break for Fair Play Check, as there traditionally is in Title Tuesday. So, just to update everybody on the standings before we do that, we've got a pretty significant contingent on 4 out of 4. You can see some of the Grandmasters. We have Yopi, who we haven't looked at yet. We're going to look at him. Wait, the king versus rook was a draw? The king versus rook was a draw? Did I miss that? Wait, did he blunder his rook? He blundered the rook! Oh, I didn't even see that. I didn't even notice that. Oh, my lands. Oh my god, draw, I see it now. What the heck? He blundered his rook. Oh god. Anyways, that's crazy, but this is Title Tuesday. We've got a pretty big group with 4 out of 4. We'll watch Jordan Ben Forrest on the other side of the break. Couple of minutes, we'll be back. Hope you're enjoying the festivities. Round 5 on the other side of this break. See you guys soon. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the late titled Tuesday. 4 rounds are in the books. We are about to watch the start of round 5. We've got a pretty big contingent with 4 out of 4, but that field is going to be thinning out very shortly. Hikaru Nakamura losing round 3 to a Colombian FIDE master, so Hikaru definitely has a lot of coming back to do, but he won his 4th round, and obviously 11 rounds. You probably usually need 9.5, sometimes 10 out of 11 to win the tournament. Okay, so the next game has begun. I do want to watch Jordan van Foreest, especially because Marco Reihle, German FIDE Master, has 4 out of 4. That's an incredible result for the FIDE Master from Germany. Let's see if he can continue his Cinderella run here as he's got the white pieces against Jordan. Now, we always have a problem after these breaks where some players don't come back to their computer in time. Okay, Jordan has played a move. We have an exchange Caro-Kann. Let's see how this one goes. Now, just a reminder for those of you who are new to Title Tuesday, this is a tournament for title players only, 11 rounds. The time control is 3 minutes plus a 1-second increment. There is an increment, so flagging, although it plays a role, doesn't play as much of a role as it does in no increment games. Okay, so a Caro-Kann. Now, this is a pretty typical line where black basically gives up the d5 pawn and then tries to win it back by going knight b6, but Jordan has misplayed this pretty significantly. Jordan has misplayed this because if he goes knight b6, white's going to go queen b3 and say, no, you're not winning this pawn that easily. This is exactly what's happening. Queen b3, white's got this pawn defended 1, 2, 3 times. Black has it attacked 3 times. That means black can't take it. Jordan is currently down a pawn, and I don't think he's winning it anytime soon. He tries to get his pieces into the game. White also has the move a5 at some point, hitting this knight and basically forcing a trade of the knight for the bishop. That essentially rectifies white's pawn structure. So right now, black might have to take on c4. The knight is hanging. No, Jordan drops his knight back to d7. He keeps the knight alive for the time being. I think this might be a great opportunity for a5, hitting the knight and forcing the trade of the knight for the bishop. You can also go d6 in this position. After e takes d6, there's an interesting tactic with bishop takes f7 and knight g5, but Marco deciding on a5. And now he can get his rook up to a4 in order to defend the c4 pawn. Let's see if he does that, or will he go knight d2? There's a lot of different ways to defend c4. He is up a healthy extra pawn here for clearly insufficient compensation. Bishop d4 is a really nice move. He found an even better way to play, and he doesn't defend the pawn directly, he defends it indirectly because he attacks the e7 pawn. And this trade is obviously good for white. He gets rid of black's fianchettoed bishop. Now white has I wouldn't say a winning position, but he's up a pawn, he's gotten the bishops off the board. This is phenomenal for Marco. He can still go knight d2. I think now he has to defend the c4 pawn, but how is he going to do it? Don't go rook a4 because that walks into a fork. Let's see how he decides to proceed here. There's also a crazy resource, knight e4, with the idea of meeting queen takes e4 with a later knight d6, but he goes for h3. Now that's a very puzzling move to me because black can still take on c4, and the bishop has plenty of squares down that diagonal. Rook c7, and he blunders the queen! Marco has blundered a queen! Oh my gosh! The queen has no squares, and if you go rook a3, black desperado sacrifices on c3 and wins a piece. What a blunder by Marco, blundering rook c7 and getting his queen trapped, and at best, he loses an entire piece. This is simply resignable, and just like that, this is how these games go. Just like that, Jordan van Foreest is going to move to 5 out of 5. He's going to be counting his lucky stars, though. He was in big trouble out of that opening, and a heartbreaker here for the German FIDE Master. Queen takes c3 is going to happen, and Jordan will emerge a full piece up. I think Marco might simply resign after this. Okay, he tries queen takes a6, but obviously Jordan is going to win this one. Let's switch on over to Fabiano's game against Praggnanandhaa, the incredibly exciting Indian youngster who is also on 4 out of 4. Caruana is worse out of the opening. Black is incredibly active pieces. The knight can come over to c6. Fabiano's only asset in this position is that black has slightly damaged pawn structure on the queen side, but that's really not that big of a problem. Although after knight d2, I don't know about this last move though. Knight d2, and Prag might end up losing that c4 pawn. Let's see how he handles this position. Okay. What hurts black is that he can't go rook c8 because that drops the rook. So he's going to have to find an alternate way to defend the c4 pawn, or he's going to have to give it away for some sort of compensation. So one way to do it would be to go knight e to c6, and then to meet knight takes c4 with knight takes e5, knight takes e5, rook takes d6, and that's exactly what Prag does. He goes knight e c6. Now, Fabi could take the pawn with the other knight, though. He could play knight d takes c4, and then after knight takes a5, rook a c8, I think that black has full compensation for the pawn. Okay, Fabi did that, and instead of taking, Prag goes knight d4. So he's angling for c2. That other knight can go to e2 as well. A lot of forks in the air. Mark my words, with a minute only on the clock, it's so easy to miss a fork in these types of positions. Let's see how Prag continues the initiative. Fabi tries to chase the knight off of b4. The knight dropping back to c6. Okay, Fabi's got to be breathing a sigh of relief here. Nothing cataclysmic has happened yet, but this knight can jump out to b3. White's pieces are still stuck in molasses. I would take black any day of the week, especially on Tuesday. Knight takes c6, but now knight b6. Ooh, Prag has allowed knight b6. I think he should have taken it with the bishop. I definitely think he should have taken that with the bishop because now he allows the trade. And now, after f4, yeah, black wins the pawn back, but now Fabi's got a pretty risk-free position. Black does have the passed pawn on d5, but that can be easily blockaded by the bishop on d3. And if you look at the 2-on-1 that goes on the queen side, White's the one who has the chance to create an outside passed pawn, the pawn that is furthest away from where the other pieces are. So I actually think Fabi's the one with a slightly preferable endgame, but the likeliest result here should still be a draw. Let's see if Prag can continue handling this accurately. Fabi might also put his bishop on a2 and then get his rook to d1. I mean, at some point, White is going to have to get his rook into the game. Both sides pretty low on time, below a minute, so this could get exciting. I still think, again, the likeliest result here is a draw. Let's see how they handle this endgame. Really, really quickly, we've got 3.5 versus 3.5. We've got Vlad Dubov, Russian Grandmaster, very, very strong. He is on the cusp of defeating Jeffrey Zhang. He's up a full exchange for no compensation whatsoever. This is very impressive stuff for Dubov, and we've got Alexander Bortnyk also on 3.5 with a very double-edged position against Azeri Grandmaster, International Master Muradli Muhammad. Let's see how he handles this. And on a top board, we have Dubov facing off against Tari. Dubov with a big advantage in the endgame. So exciting games all around. But let's go back to the Fabi game because they're entering the time scramble phase and things are getting very exciting. Black is a pawn on d3. Can Prag sustain that pawn? He goes rook d6. He prepares to double. I love what Prag is doing here. I think Fabi has let this pawn get too far. He goes up to f2, rook c8, threatening rook c2. That's a potentially very dangerous threat. Fabi wants to meet that with king e3, keeping the rook protected on d2. He needs to keep a piece on d2 at all times to blockade the pawn, but this is really flimsy. There's a lot of dangerous checks in the air as Fabi tries to rush order the creation of a passed pawn. So now he has a passed pawn himself. Rook c5, though, looks pretty good. Prag getting his king to e7. Black is definitely the one in the driver's seat now, but can Prag convert this into a win? 10 seconds for him to Fabi 17. And bishop e4 results in a fork. Wait, Fabi has blundered knight c4? Knight c4 on the next move. King c5 is even better. Knight c4 wins. Oh, rook e1. Rook e1 wins the game. Fabi blundered. King takes d4 and he loses the bishop in the game. Fabi is now down a full rook. This is over. This is all over. He let the pawn get too far. Prag capitalized on it, and now he's up a full rook, and he has a very easy win. The simplest is to go rook e2 check, force the rook trade, but 4 seconds for Prag. Let's see. His internet better hold up here. King takes c4, and I think it will. It's all over. Prag is going to win. Rook e2 check, and that's it. Praggnanandhaa on 5 out of 5, defeating Fabi in that endgame. It was always tough to play for White. We're watching Dubov, who somehow managed to lose a piece in that endgame, but he might still hold this endgame together. I don't see how Tari makes any progress here. And now maybe f5 needs to be played, but Dubov going back and forth with his king. The b and the e pawns are basically allowing him to set up a fortress. Wait, bishop d3. Evalbar didn't like what Dubov just did. Bishop c2, though. Now king d5. Now king d5 and e5. Now it's a draw. I think Tari should not have moved his king from c6, but he's got a second. He's got to move. Black needs to be careful here. Don't lose. Oh my goodness, Tari is panicking. White might win this game now. King f7. It still should be a draw, but he's down to 0 seconds. He's going to lose on time. He's going to lose. How did Tari lose that? Oh my goodness, Tari lost that. He got too ambitious. He went the wrong way with his king. He let Dubov create a pass pawn, and Daniel Dubov is going to win. He's got 5 out of 5. What a ridiculous finale there. Couple more games still going. We've got Parham and Dmitry. Parham about to lose another game to an IM from Russia. Wow, Parham not his tournament. Not his tournament at all. This is an easy win for Black. And he's got a lot of work cut out for him. This should be pretty straightforward win. Rook g2 and then bishop g7 allows the pawn to promote. What an incredible game. And Fabi, he's going to be kicking himself because he managed to recover from that endgame. He had a good position at some point, but just not able to keep Prag's pawn at bay. Okay, all of the games are over. Round 5 is in the books. Let's update the standings. And let's see who's got 5 out of 5. Well, we still have a group of 4 people with 5.5. We have Dubov, Jordan Van Foreest, who trapped Marco Real's queen in a bad position, Rasmus Svane winning another game, and Prag. That is the contingent of 5 out of 5. Hikaru Nakamura continues to mount a recovery after that round 3 defeat. He's on 4 out of 5. We've got a big group of 4.5. Nothing is decided yet. This is what makes Title Tuesday so exciting. So many players have a lot of points, and nothing is decided generally until the very last round. Okay, round 6 should begin momentarily. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to the late Title Tuesday. I'm Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, bringing you the coverage. The morning tournament was won by Hikaru Nakamura, but he's got his work cut out for him after that round 3 loss. Okay, so we're going to keep an eye on the top games. 4 people have 5.5, and they all should be able to play each other. I don't think they've played each other yet. I'm particularly excited to see Daniel Dubov. I just get the sense that Dubov, it's his tournament, right? He got a little bit lucky in that last game against Tari, but sometimes that's what you need to win these tournaments. You need a little bit of luck in some of these games, and then, once you sense that this might be your tournament, you really turn the jets on. Dubov has been playing creative, interesting chess. We're going to keep an eye on his game to start. Okay, so the games are about to start. Let's see. Dubov. Oh, okay, they've already begun. Apologies for that. Okay, so Dubov with the black pieces here against Jordan Van Foreest. And currently, Dubov is down a pawn in this endgame, but white has really, really weak queenside pawns, which I think black is going to be able to target. And we're going to see if Dubov can hold this position together. Pretty pleasant, I think, here for black. Not really a position that Dubov prefers. These kind of pawn down endgames where you have to grind out a draw. I think Jordan has to be feeling pretty happy here. And our other top game is Prag against Svane. They're still in the opening phase. Prag has given up the 2-bishop advantage, but he's got some pressure going on the e5 pawn. I don't know. This is about equal. Yeah. So this is about equal. This is not very hard to say who's going to be better here. The pawn on e5 is both a strength and a weakness. It's allowing black to grab space in the center. Now he's gone f6 in order to reinforce that pawn. I personally prefer black in these types of positions. He's got the 2 bishops. I think black is a little bit for choice here. More space. And in a blitz game, it can be hard to play when you're so cramped. And there we go. Prag trying to expand on the queen side. He goes b4. Rasmus says, no, you're not going to b5. He drops his bishop back to f8. The knight can come into d4. Very pleasant position for the German grandmaster here. Prag has to be precise. Now, one idea for white here might be to go knight d2 and then knight e4 and try to get the knight to c5. I think if you're Prag, you need to go for activity here. He plays at knight d2. Good stuff by the Indian grandmaster. Both sides down below 2 minutes. This definitely has the feel of a game that might result and end in a time scramble. So we'll see. We'll see how Prag handles this. Back to the Dubov game we go. They're still in the endgame. White is still up a pawn, but Dubov has managed to get a monster knight to c5. I personally think that black shouldn't have too much trouble securing the draw here. I feel like one way or another, Jordan's pawns are so weak that he's going to have to give one of them up. So I think a draw is a very likely result here. Let's check into Hikaru's attempt at a comeback here as he faces off against the beast, Vlad Dubov, who beat Jeffrey Zhang in the previous round. He's on 4.5 out of 5. And guess what? I think black is a pretty nice position here. If he goes d4, Dobrov is a pawn down, but he's got a monster center. He's got 2 bishops, almost reminiscent of the Prag game in a certain way. And he's got this big center. These pawns are defending each other. Nakamura, though, he's got this A pawn that's an outside passer, could be a very big asset in an endgame, and we have a queen trade, knight g5, trying to get the knight back around to e4. That's a big square. Bishop a5, though, looks very tempting here, pinning the knight on d2, and then maybe get the other bishop to g6 and put more pressure on white's knight construction. This actually looks very good for Dobrov at the moment. Bishop g6 here looks pretty unpleasant. He goes rook b8. He gets his rook into the b file. Ugh, this is unpleasant. I still think he should go bishop g6, and he does. And Hikaru has to move his rook back, and bishop c3 now looks pretty unpleasant for white. But Dobrov, he's down to a minute. This is what Hikaru does. When he has an unpleasant position, he puts so much practical pressure, even when he's worse, that he forces the opponent to bleed a lot of their clock. f3, excellent move by Hikaru, reinforcing his knight. Bishop c3, Dobrov doesn't let him breathe, though. Where does the rook go? If the rook goes to a2, you walk into bishop f7, he goes rook c1. Now, if I'm Vlad, I would take on e4 or I would take on d2. I would discharge some of the tension and then go after the a4 pawn. If Dubov can win the a4 pawn, he's going to be completely in the driver's seat. But he's down to 40 seconds, and Hikaru with plenty of time on the clock. I feel like the time might be a deciding factor and not in Black's favor. But he takes on e4, and he slams the rook into b3. And now Hikaru's bishop is in trouble. This is big trouble for White. He has to take on c3 and then play rook a1, but that gives Black a monster pass pawn on c3. This might be another loss for Hikaru if Dubov can keep himself alive on the clock. Really quickly, let's check into our top games. We've got Dubov, that's still a draw. We've got Prag putting a lot of pressure now. Svane has allowed Prag's pieces to get tremendous activity, but I know y'all are excited about Hikaru's game, so let's stick to this one for now. Okay. Let's see. All right, c2, rook e1, rook c8 now winning the c5 pawn. This is looking really, really unpleasant for White. Rook b1 instead, but bishop d2. He goes bishop b3. Rook takes f3 here, by the way, is a winning move. There's no way that anybody's going to see that, though. He goes rook f to b8. Okay. Let's see. King f2, rook takes a1, and rook b1 looks really pleasant. This is almost winning for Black. He goes rook b2. How does Hikaru? Now c1 queen is a promotion threat. Hikaru is on the ropes here, but he can go bishop c1 maybe and hold that pawn down. Let's see. He goes bishop c1, back to b3 goes Dubov. Now the a1 rook is hanging. Hikaru has to drop his bishop back to b2. It goes rook a2 instead. The bishop is currently defended by the rook. Rook d3. Okay, maybe rook d1. Oh, but rook takes c2. Dubov blundered. Why did he take that pawn? Oh my goodness, what a blunder by Black. He took the pawn on c6 rather than going simply rook c3 and winning that pawn. What did he just do? Oh my goodness, what a blunder. But still, some drawing chances for Black. I don't think he's pulling this one out, though. He's down to 20 seconds. Hikaru once again pulling a rabbit out of the hat. Now back to our top games. We've got Prag with a tremendous dominating position. He should be able to win this against Rasmus Svane, knight a5. No, this is over. This is simply game over. And meanwhile, in the Dubov game, they're down to a time scramble. And Dubov still hasn't been able to win the pawn back. And now the move f4 looks really good for White. Oh, they made some moves here. Knight e5, knight takes c5, and king takes c5. Still maybe in the realm of a draw, but very, very unpleasant for Dubov the entire game. Back to the Prag game we go. Svane has to give up a piece. This is over. This is a full piece up for Prag. He's got more time on the clock. He should be able to win this. Rook b1 looks good here. Trade the rook off from b6. And just a couple more accurate moves are required. Knight takes c6 maybe? Bishop c6, bishop c6. Yeah, knight takes c6. Knight a7. Ooh, he's got to be careful, though. The knight dropping out to c8. Oh, and then bishop takes d5 and knight d6 forks the rooks and wins the game. He goes queen c5, but now rook b5. Rook b5, there was one more chance by Black. No, instead he walks into another fork, and this is game over. Knight takes d7 or rook takes d7, and there's a queen trade on the cards with queen f8. And he does it, and he wins. The knight's going to get out very easily. Rook a1 wins the pawn on a5. This is totally, totally over. Yeah, knight takes a4. I think we're going to see a resignation for Svane. He does resign. And a huge win for Prag. Now, Dubov, by the way, let's see. They're still playing. Oh, my goodness. Dubov is a pawn up now. How did he do that? Oh, but it's a draw. It's a draw because he can't leave the knight with his king. The knight keeps circling around between g6 and c6, and this is over. Okay, so we've got Hikaru still playing against Dubov, and Hikaru has lost a piece, but he's got 3 pawns. This is an incredibly sharp endgame. Dubov should be able to hold this, though. Vlad Dubov should be able to hold this. Knight takes g4, simply an h7, rook h2. Now rook h5. Whoa. Rook b2 check is forced. No, maybe he'll lose it. Rook b2, rook c2, keeps checking. Rook a2. Oh, he's losing it. h7. Dubov's going to lose. I mean, Hikaru is just unreal. It's unreal how he pulls these off. Rook a5. Oh, wait, no. He should have taken the knight. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. He could have taken the knight. He's gonna lose this. He's going to draw this. This is unbelievable by Hikaru. He pre-moved king h4. I think he expected rook g7 check. And yeah, then king h4 wins. Instead, Vlad going rook a5 check. And after king takes g4, it's resignation. Hikaru forgetting about knight f6 check. Bad pre-move there. He had plenty of time. Just not his tournament here so far. Unbelievable. Just a couple more games remaining in this round. And Hikaru sheds another half point. That might bury his chances to win the tournament. We will see. We're watching round 6 of 11, the next round beginning very shortly. Just a couple more games remaining. We've got this one, which is going to be a draw anytime. And this other one, David Paravian unable to defeat Alex Papasimakopoulos. That game ends in a draw. The other one ends in a draw as well. Round 7 on the cards, just about in a moment. And then after round 7, there's another fair play break. And then after that, the last couple of rounds in the tournament. Okay. Round 7 about to start. We have, let's update the standings. We have only one player still with a perfect score, and that honor belongs to Praggnanandhaa. He's on 6 out of 6. The Indian youngster, just an unbelievably strong player. He made a name for himself in the recent Tata Steel tournament, and once again running the field so far. But he faces stalwart opposition in Daniil Dubov, who is hungry for a win. He's on 5.5 out of 6. Pretty big group with 5.5. We've got Indic, Jabava, who always seems to do so well on these title Tuesdays. Yopi, that's Jordan van Foreest, and Daniil Dubov. This is going to be our marquee game, though, with Praggnanandhaa. If he wins this game, he extends his lead over the field, and he's going to be in phenomenal shape to win the tournament. But let's see if he can handle this endgame. I like the choice by Dubov. Prag is a very tactical player, and Dubov gets into a Catalan endgame where he's a pawn down. Once again, he seems to have an affinity for sacrificing a pawn in the opening and then getting into an endgame. But on the plus side for white, he's got a very strong bishop. Black's light squared bishop is kind of dull, right? It's staring at these pawns. But Prag says, no, I'm not giving a pawn up that easily. He clings to his pawn. And generally, these positions are considered to be pretty balanced. White's got compensation for the pawn. White's got better placed pieces. But if Black can consolidate, get his bishop to c6, make a castle, Black might end up just emerging a pawn up. So Dubov needs to be precise here. He goes bishop f4. I think he's gearing up for knight d6 check. It's important for White to stop Black from castling here. As long as the king remains in the center, Black's rooks end up being discoordinated, and White's compensation goes on. But rook ac1, he allows castles. I think Prag should take this opportunity and castle. I absolutely think Prag should castle here. Okay. I don't believe, and I see a question in the chat, I don't believe that Prag has won a title Tuesday yet, but this very well might be his first. I'm sure that he will win one at some point. Okay. So let's see how Dubov handles this. Prag has managed to castle. I really like Black's position here. For now, the ball is squarely in White's court. Okay. So let's check into some of our other games. We've got a player that we haven't checked out as much so far, Alexander Indic, Grandmaster from Serbia. Very strong player. He's over 2,600. He's facing off against Grandmaster Badur Jabava, who is a very much household name. Every title Tuesday, he's right atop the standings. He tries so very hard. Okay. So what do we have here? Well, we have a pretty unbalanced position. White has the 2 bishops, but Black has a lot of pressure on White's center. The knight on d2 is currently hanging. Rook fd1 defending it. Now, you cannot take on e4 because knight takes e4 exposes a discovered attack against the queen. So Badur probably should move his queen. Maybe queen f4. That looks really good. Queen f4, queen e7. Goes back to e7. I really like Black's position here. I feel like, practically speaking, Black's got so much pressure on White's e4 pawn. Black's got well-placed pieces. Indic has to go f3. Ben Feingold cringed at that. h5 by Badur, advancing his kingside pawn, trying to grab more space. Okay, h4, knight h5, knight f4 is a possible idea here. Indic also pretty low on the clock. He's down to a minute 30 or so. This is looking rather unpleasant for Indic. Let's see how he tries to coordinate his pieces. I think for White, the strategy should probably be to try to trade off the rooks. The issue is that if you move your knight, you potentially walk into a6, and the a4 pawn is also a pretty significant weakness. So a lot of things to keep track of here for Mr. Indic, also known as Becca, named after Rebecca Harris. No, a6, b5. Now Jabava has gotten a protected pass pawn on b5, which he uses as an anchor point for his knight. White's position is really close to falling apart here. He's down below a minute. This is really, really hairy for White. Okay, so back to the Dubov game, where he still hasn't reclaimed that sacrifice pawn. So for the second game in a row, Dubov finds himself in an endgame where he's a pawn down, and he doesn't seem to have sufficient compensation for it. Black king is now perfectly safe. Rook d5, very nice move. If you take the rook, you allow Black to connect his pawns. This might be a win for Prag. Rook f1, not a good sign. Dubov moves his rook away, tries to keep as many pieces on the board as possible. Man, oh man, this is really, really unpleasant. Really, really unpleasant for black. b6, Prag cementing his knight on a5. Dubov prepares to double his rooks on the c-file and put more pressure on the c4 pawn. But what he needs to do is try to get this knight off of a5. That is the key for white to win this pawn back. The other issue is that b5 could come, cementing black's control over the c4 pawn. That could come at any moment, perhaps even now. So good stuff here for Prag. He should be in no risk to lose this game. And the only other top game that we have here is Jordan van Foreest against Haik Martirosyan, who's got a pretty big attack going against black's king. Knight takes f7 is an idea here. It would be checkmate if this queen weren't guarding that square. But this is looking really iffy for black. Maybe get this pawn up to d7, and he does. If you take on g3, now f takes g3 looks really strong, and rook f1 is coming. Uh-oh. The f7 pawn is going to end up under serious fire here. I think Haik should be able to win this game. Queen h5 looks great here. Man, this is looking close to lost for black, but where is the crushing move? I think queen h5 followed by rook f1 is the way to go here. He plays queen h5. Another idea, after king g8, there's knight takes f7, and if queen takes f7, then queen g5, and that's exactly what's happening. It's over. Knight h6, and then rook f1, and it's winning. He's going to win a queen. And Haik Martirosyan, what a game, as he brings down Van Foreest, who had 5.5 out of 6, to get to 6 out of 7 himself. Martirosyan very much in the mix now after this crushing victory. Rook f7, and I think Van Foreest is simply going to resign here. He's going to make a couple more moves. Back to the Jabava game. Back to the Dubov game. I think Prag is going to win. Prag is crushing him. Look at this, knight b4. He's still up a pawn, and now he's got complete and total domination. Prag, if he wins this game, moves to 7 out of 7. Nobody has been come close to stopping him. And now the b2 pawn, I think, is falling as well. This is a very impressive effort by Prag. He goes g5, chasing the knight away. He's going to take on b2 at some point, and then his c-pawn is going to run. Oh, no, Dubov just wanders the knight. Dubov forgets about the knight. That was a mouse slip. That was a mouse slip by Dubov. He wanted to go rook 8 check, but the game was over anyway. This was completely winning for black, and Praggnanandhaa moves to 7 out of 7. He's in great shape to win this tournament with 4 rounds to go. We're watching Jabava. Jabava still with a good position, but Indic has managed to keep things alive. Whoa. Okay, so you can't take f5 because the rook on a1 is hanging. This is a very dangerous position for both sides. This pawn on f7 is under significant pressure by white's pieces. I would consider going bishop b6 here and trying to trade the bishops, as Jabava himself down to 12 seconds. He doesn't seem to find a move here. Goes bishop back to e6, but wait a minute, something was wrong. Rook 81! Oh my goodness! Queen b8 at the end is going to win a piece. Indic is going to win. Unbelievable. Jabava with a huge blunder. If he takes on d1 twice, queen comes over to b8 with a fork against the king and the rook, and Jabava loses. No, he doesn't lose on time, but he loses the rook. And Alexander Indic on 6.5 out of 7. I think he's going to be playing Praggnanandhaa. That's going to be a huge game, and he's going to do his very, very best. Yeah, queen takes c6. It's all over, 2-on-1 on the king side. And Jabava, what a heartbreaker. He was better the entire game. He was up on time. Alexander Indic, nerves of steel. We're watching Rasmus Svane against Konrad Holtz, another game where both players have 5 out of 7, and this is going to be a draw. Black is going to deliver perpetual to the white king. Okay, so Svane, after a great start, he seems to have fallen off just a little bit. And the games are almost over. We've got a couple top games remaining. Oparin and Kosak 12, international master from Poland. This one's about to be a draw. Now, we remind you that there will be a small break for a fair play check after this round. And then we will move to the home stretch, the last 4 rounds of the tournament. Okay, so it looks like the games are almost complete. Just a couple remaining. We've got David Paravian and Boyan. This is a mate in 1 here. Paravian winning his game pretty straightforwardly. And I think that's just about it. We have one last game here as Eric Rosen was defeated by... No, Eric Rosen losing his game to a FIDE master. That concludes round 7. And, oh, no, there isn't a break. I'm sorry. That break comes after round 8. That break comes after round 8, I think. So, no, we have the next round underway. Yeah, my apologies for that. And we've got Prag playing against Becca. And whoa, what an opening by Prag. Knight c3 and d3. Okay. That's a bit of a strange opening. This looks pretty good for Black already. Now, that might have been a mouse slip. Maybe Prag wanted to go d4 and get into a Jababa London. I don't know. He's on 7 out of 7. We're going to watch this game exclusively because this is a tournament-deciding game right here. Because if Prag wins, he gets on to 8 out of 8. And, you know, there's a group of 6 out of 7, but they're not even that close. So Indich, everybody on 6 out of 7 is praying that Alexander Indich wins this game and gives them a chance. Okay. So Prag trying to get this into kind of a King's Indian setup. He goes c4. This almost looks like a reverse King's Indian. And Becca says, okay, he's got a King's Indian up several tempi. He could also go g5 in a position like this. I thought he should have gone g5 and stopped knight h4. Prag probably going to get his other knight out to c4. This is literally like a King's Indian with colors reversed. c3, Prag opening up the center. This is a pretty typical move in King's Indian positions, but he's allowed b5. This is a terrible position for white. Well, maybe terrible is a pretty hard, strong word. Prag, he needs to get going on the king side. He goes c4. Ugh. And that's actually a pretty interesting move, because if b takes c4 happens, generally in these positions, Black does not want to give away his light squared bishop, because that creates a significant weakness on the light squares. Okay. So big choice here for Indich. He could go b4, but I wouldn't do that. I would try to keep the queen side as open as possible. Okay, rook b8. He keeps the tension. That knight on a3 is currently out of commission. Prag could contemplate going b3 and trying to free up his knight and then getting back to c2, at least doing something with his knight. He goes queen e2, preparing to coordinate his rooks. No question that Black is better in this position, but the thing about the eval bar and the King's Indian is that the eval bar always thinks that Black or white is better in the King's Indian, and it's a lot of it is because white is so cramped. But if Prag can get f4 and if Prag can get himself going on the king side, the landscape of the position could very well change entirely. So can Prag get f4? Now, if he goes f4 immediately, then after e takes f4, he's going to have problems with his knight on h4. That knight is going to be hanging if white recaptures with the pawn, and that is exactly how white wants to recapture. So Prag can also go knight f5 here. Knight f5, by the way, that's an interesting resource. Gf5, ef5, and the knight on c6 hangs. Indich's last move has made that possible. I think Prag has to try knight f5 because he's slowly but surely getting pushed off the board here as Black is making queenside progress. Bishop a5 here would trade the bishops. That seems like a favorable trade as well. Prag on bishop e1, though. What a tricky move. He prepares f4. That's a great move. He prepares f4. Why does he prepare it? Because after ef4, gf4, the bishop is going to guard the knight on h4. So Prag knows exactly what he has to do to get his position some life here. And Indich thinking of different ways that he can try to prevent f4. If he goes g5, then that knight swings over to f5. That's kind of out of the question. You don't want to give white that square. How is Indich going to prevent f5? He decides to take on c4 and open up the queen side. Okay. Bishop takes c4. All right, bishop takes c4. Let's see what white recaptures with bc or dc. Both options are fine. He goes bc. Now I think Prag is in pretty good shape. I think if he goes f4, no, he goes bishop h3. He activates his bishop. And he still delays the move f4, but I think it's going to happen at some point. Okay, so quickly, let's check some of our other top games. We have Mkhitaryan with the black pieces against Dobrov, who pulled that draw out of Hikaru Nakamura. But this one looks pretty double-edged. Another King's Indian type structure with protected pass pawn on d5, the knight swinging over to c4. This is a pretty double-edged position, but I promised you we're going to focus on Prag's game. That's what we're going to do. Let's go back to Prag's game against Indich. And Prag has managed to get f4, and he's got, look at his pieces. They're all clustered on the king side. He's found a way to get all of his pieces on the right spots. In the meantime, Indich really hasn't gotten anything going on the other side of the board. Yeah, he has a rook on b6, but where's that rook really going? Rook b2, never possible because of queen takes b2, obviously. But the question for Prag is, what does he do with his f-pawn? If he takes on e5 prematurely, then he gives up control over a very important square, so he doesn't want to do that. Instead, he intensifies the pressure on the pawn. Indic defends a4, trying to create pressure on the other side of the board as well. Indic might consider just going a5 here, but if he goes a5, he might end up losing that pawn after white takes on e5. So very tricky position, and definitely Prag is the one in the driver's seat at this point. But how does white accumulate the kingside pressure? Can you make any progress? If you go f5, that closes down the position. That is not in white's favor. So I don't know how Prag makes Prag. Maybe just go king h1. Maybe just bide your time. He goes a5. That's a pretty committal move, though. This pawn is now more of a weakness than a strength. I don't know about Prag's last move. He's down to 35 seconds. This is getting a little bit concerning to me because if Prag burns a lot of time... Oh, but now he takes up 4. Oh, my goodness. Wait a minute. Now he's allowed ef. He's allowed ef. I think Prag has forgotten that he can't take back with a g-pawn. And Indic doesn't do it. This is mind-boggling to me. Instead, Prag going f5, Indic responding with queen g5. This still looks pretty good for black. No idea why Indic didn't take there. Prag down to 30 seconds. Rook b2. He still doesn't have too much to show for it on the king side. But if black's rook moves away from the 7th rank, then and only then is white going to take on g6 and infiltrate to f7. Indic does go rook b2. Does he want to take on f2 first? But wait a minute. Knight f5 check there was an interesting intermezzo. F takes g6. Now, who's got control over the FL? Bishop out to e6. Great move by Prag. Knight f6, closing down the FL. Prag could swing his bishop to d5, and he does. Indic gets his knight back to e7. Decided not to capture the pawn on a5. This is really double-edged. Knight f3, attacking the queen. Queen h5 looks forced. No, queen e3. Allowing knight takes e5, but Indic making a play on his activity. Queen f3, though. Where is that activity leading him to? And now he's down a pawn. He's down a pass pawn, a queen trade. Prag must be breathing a sigh of relief now. He's down to 20 seconds, but he's up a pawn in the endgame. Prag is now definitely better. Indic should not have given away that e5 pawn. He thought rook b2 was strong. It wasn't as strong as he thought. Knight comes back to e5, defending d3. And if Indic moves away from the b file, then Prag's rook is going to swing to b2 and then to b7 with potentially decisive effect. I think rook b2 is incredibly strong here. No, Prag going the other way. He goes g4. He wants to go g5. He wants his rook to infiltrate down the f file. Indic might have to go g5 here, but then I think Prag is going to go rook b2. Both sides now down to 20 seconds. Oh my goodness, this is getting heated, and Prag is definitely winning here. But can Indic pull a rabbit out of the hat? He's down to 10 seconds now. Rook comes to b2. Here he goes. Rook takes a5. The rook is infiltrating. Can Prag find a way to convert this into an actual material advantage? Maybe go back to b6 and harass the other knight. He goes bishop b6. Keeps tightening the screws. Indic sending his a-pawn down the board. That's his only source of counterplay. Prag repeating once, but I don't think he's taking a draw. He might want to move his knight back and then push his own pass pawn forward. I think knight f3 is a really strong move here. He goes rook c7. Instead, he hunts for the c-pawn, and then he's going to bring his rook behind the pawn. Indic pushing it all the way to a2. But c5. c5 is going to pick that pawn off, and Prag is winning here. This is completely winning for black. For white, just a couple more accurate moves are required. He can just take on a2 here. He's up 2 pawns. No counterplay. Indic trading rooks. Prag should be able to win this and go to 8 out of 8, knight d7. This is an easy win for white. Here comes his e-pawn. Here comes his king. He's going to win another one. And Prag with an incredible victory against Indic. It looked really precarious for white out of the opening. At some point, again, Indic looked like he was better. But Prag, he keeps his composure. He wins that endgame in time pressure. What a performance. He's on 8 out of 8. Jordan van Foreest making a draw himself. Let's check out some of the other top games. We've got Daniel Darda, Grandmaster from Belgium, about to defeat Grigori Oparin. Very impressive game there. We have Hikaru Nakamura, who won his game. I think, yes, he's on 6.5 out of 8, so Hikaru's still not done. He's still right atop the tournament standings. If Hikaru wins his next 2 games, he might very well still be in contention for first place. Prag is special. He's on 8 out of 8, and Prag is going to play someone with 6.5. My guess, and we do have a break after this round, my guess is that Prag is going to play Hikaru Nakamura because Hikaru is the highest rated player with 6.5. He might either play Hikaru or he might play the player with the best tie breaks. We'll see. Okay, just a couple of games remaining. Azicom losing to Bakro. Bakro having himself a pretty good tournament as well. And only 1 game remaining. Kashishvili, whom I played actually, Georgian Grandmaster against a National Master from Brazil. This should be a dead draw. Ooh. Okay, and after this game, we will go on a couple minutes break as the team does a fair play check. Very important. And after that, we will come back for the last 3 rounds. Okay, I don't know what they're doing here, but one of them should offer a draw. But this is often the case in Title Tuesday. There always seems to be one game where both sides are playing a completely drawn endgame for ad nauseum. Okay. well, not much to say here. We can catch our breath. This has been a fascinating Title Tuesday so far, and everything is yet to be decided. Praggnanandhaa on 8 out of 8. Let's update the standings here. We can see Prag on 8 out of 8. Fabiano Caruana alone at 7 out of 8. He's been playing so well ever since the start of the RCC. He's warmed up. His blitz level has improved considerably over the last couple of months, and he's showing that once again today. He very much still is in contention for first. If Prag loses a game, then all hell breaks loose. Anything is possible. As long as Prag keeps winning, he's going to run away with the tournament. Okay. Well, this game is still going. This is a little bit ridiculous, and I think Black is the one who's instigating this because White has repeated moves, and finally a draw by the 50-move rule. That concludes the games from round 7 that concludes the games from round 7. Round 8 is going to begin. This was round 8. My apologies. I'm confused. Round 9 is going to begin very shortly, but first we are going to take a break. It's going to last 2 or 3 minutes. When we return, we've got the last 3 rounds of Title Tuesday. We will see if Praggnanandhaa can continue his incredibly impressive tournament performance, or if one of the players with 6.5 or 7 can catch up. Please stay tuned. Buckle your seatbelts. 3 very exciting rounds to go. You're watching the late Title Tuesday. Prag, will he continue his streak? We will find out on the other side of this break. Welcome back to Titled Tuesday. We have here a more extended view of the standings. You can see Prag atop the tournament with 8 out of 8, or awaiting the start of round 9, which should begin momentarily. And we have a big group trailing Prag. We've got 7 out of 8, Fabiano Caruana, and then a big group of 6.5 out of 8, all the way to 10th place. And you can see all of the big names there, including, of course, Hikaru Nakamura. So we have 3 very big rounds remaining. Welcome, everybody, to those just joining or watching the late Titled Tuesday. There are now 2 Titled Tuesdays every Tuesday with more prizes and more action. It's 11 rounds, 3+1 time control, and we've got the game of the tournament right here. Praggnanandhaa against Nakamura. We are not moving anywhere. We are watching this game in its entirety because this is what's going to decide the tournament. Prag with the white pieces. Hikaru is playing black. He's got 6.5 out of 8. Hikaru losing round 3 to a Colombian FIDE master. And ever since then, he's been on the back foot trying to recover. And another disappointing draw for him against Dubov. So he basically needs to run the field in the last 3 rounds if he is to have a chance at first place. And it starts here. Prag playing an English defense, okay, which, of course, Hikaru likes to play himself. A5, expanding on the queen side. This is still probably close to being theory. A3, potentially preparing to expand on the queen side with B4. Position is approximately equal out of the opening. Hard to say anything definitively. Hikaru pushing A4, so pretty committal move here, but he prevents Prag from pushing his own B pawn. On the other hand, the A4 pawn, of course, might end up being a liability for black later in the game. Bishop C3, F6, Prag forcing a little bit of a weakening of black's king side, Hikaru going F6, and white would love to play D4 in one of these positions. Of course, that's not possible at the time for the time being because it drops the knight. Prag going E4. Whoa, that's an interesting move. So he freezes black's E5 pawn, and Prag, I think, is orienting himself toward D4. If he can get the D4 pawn break in, white is going to be in great shape. But if Hikaru can reinforce his control over the D4 square, then white's going to be paying the price positionally. Queen C2, Prag trying to stay in contact with the A4 pawn to keep this A8 rook passive. But the eval bar, not a fan of how Prag is handling this because D4 is still not possible for the time being. That knight on C4 is still a headache. So I think on his next move, Prag might want to drop the knight back to E3, but there's a problem with that too because bishop will come to B3 and Hikaru could play B5 here. What if Hikaru plays B5? Where does Prag go with his knight? Because if the knight moves back to D2, you drop the D3 pawn. Although maybe that endgame is okay for white. Definitely not a great opening for Prag. I don't feel like this English stuff is in his style. And I feel like this is right up Hikaru's alley. But Nakamura taking a long time here trying to figure out how he wants to punish Prag for this dubious positional play. And he goes G5. So this is what he wants. He wants to go G4, knock the knight out of F3, and reinforce black's control over the D4 square. I feel like this is probably not the most that black could have squeezed out of this position. Prag repositioning his queen to E2. And now the queen is defending the knight. So D4 is now a threat for the first time in the last couple of moves. He's trying to force Hikaru's hand. Hikaru, he goes knight D4. He puts a knight in the middle. Okay, I don't know about that. Now Prag has choices. He can take with a knight and go bishop to B4. Or he can take with the bishop and advance his pawn to E5, trying to blast open the center and expose the weaknesses in Hikaru's position. And boy, does black have some weaknesses. I mean, look at these pawns on the king. Hikaru's king is pretty exposed. White's got pretty well-placed pieces here, but can Prag convert that into something specific? Big, big decision to be made for white here. Which piece does he take the knight on D4 with, the knight or the bishop? I like both moves. My inclination would be to take with the bishop and go E5, and I feel like this is in Prag's style as well. Very aggressive, very principled, trying to open up the center and expose black's vulnerable pieces he takes, and there we go. E5, immediately Hikaru responding with G4, bang, trying to get the knight off of F3. Now, knight H4. Now still, F takes E5, knight takes E5. The pawn on E5 is sufficiently well defended, and Hikaru might want to go F5 here. Yes, that does give up the B7 pawn, but I feel like it's probably worthy price to pay, because otherwise, white takes on F6, opens up the E file, and black's position is just too flimsy to tolerate that. He goes F5, and Prag is going to be up a pawn here. Where does the bishop go? Maybe even bishop H1 should be considered so that the knight could have maneuvered through G2 to F4. Now he goes back to G2. White is definitely better at this point, but Hikaru has a lot of piece activity. He goes rook B5. He can double his rooks. He's blockading the E5 pawn. So this is actually very double-edged from a practical standpoint. And at some point, of course, bishop takes C4 could come, further weakening the B2 pawn. So super double-edged position. Prag trying to shore up the E5 pawn. He goes F4. And he keeps the bishop out of commission. Now, if Hikaru takes on Poisson, which he does, he lets the knight back in the game. He goes bishop h6, preventing knight g5 and activating his bishop. Maybe he'll go rook d to b8 to double rooks. Hikaru could also go c5 at some point, but that would mean opening up the d6 square for white side. King h8, king h1, both sides sheltering their kings, pushing them closer to the corner. Hikaru goes rook g8, so is he exploring the option of playing f4 to open up white's king? Maybe. Very interesting idea as Prag drops below a minute. Oh, he's right at 1 minute. He goes knight h4, maybe queen h5 on the cards. Both sides have problems with their king safety. Neither side's king is perfectly safe, but who's going to get to the enemy king first? Now, Hikaru drops below a minute. This potentially is going to be a time kill. This is so exciting. Now, how is Hikaru going to continue his activity? Maybe knight d5, trying to get the knight to e3, but that might allow queen h5. I actually still think Prag is better here. And Prag could also reposition his rook to f1 in order to put more pressure on the f5 pawn. There's knight d5. Rook f1 here looks good. Maybe Hikaru wants to play f4 in that position to really mix things up and get things as spicy as possible. Prag taking his time here. I actually like this, the way Hikaru is handling this position. I think he's orienting himself toward an attack on white's king. Queen h5, there it is. Hikaru could slide his queen to g7, but that would mean giving up the f5 pawn. Black cannot afford that. Bishop e3. I still think Hikaru wants to push this pawn down to f4, and that's going to open up the possibility of bishop g4, which of course would fork the queen and the rook. So Prag, with 30 seconds on the clock, I feel like now practically Black's position is more pleasant, and here comes f4. Big initiative now for Hikaru. The queen on h5 could end up in serious trouble. Prag is down to 24 seconds. Can Hikaru transfer and convert this initiative into something concrete? Bishop e4. But what about bishop g4? Oh, what a move! Knight f6! Beautiful move by Hikaru, using that pin, using the lateral pin. And the wheels are coming off completely. D takes e3, or are they? Queen f6 check. Prag still has a lot of counterplay against Black's king. This looks winning for Black, but the e-ball bar can't decide. It's showing zeros, maybe d3. Oh my goodness, what a sharp position. But Black's king is still in a lot of trouble here, and that is really hurting Hikaru's ability to focus on the initiative. He's down to 15 seconds. He doesn't see what to do. He goes d3. Queen f6 checks, something that white could throw in. Rook c3 by Prag. Will Hikaru continue pushing? He takes on c4, rook takes c4, and rook b6, dropping the rook back. Now Prag has to go queen h5, and he can no longer get his queen to f6. He intercepts it with e6. He sacrifices. Oh, rook takes c7. What a move. But now, after queen c7, queen e6, it's anybody's game. Queen c7, queen e6, f takes g3. Now queen f6 check, potentially, and queen g7. Is this going to be a draw? He takes on g3. Hikaru can take with his queen, and then Prag is going to give a check on f6. This actually might end up being a draw. Bishop g5. No, Hikaru tries to keep the queens on the board. Knight f5. At Prag, either side could get mated here. Rook d1. Knight d6. Prag trying to go to f7. Hikaru down to 0 seconds. Kill this on time. Oh my goodness. Knight f7. Knight takes d8. Now Prag is winning. Oh my god. Queen d5. Trying to force the queen trade. And Prag should be able to win this now. e5. Queen d4 check. Moving his king up. Still dangerous, though. He's got a pawn on d2. Does he go? Queen f7 is mate. Oh my god. Prag is going to win. Oh my goodness. What a game. Prag beats Hikaru, and he gets to 9 out of 9. Unbelievable. Unbelievable presence of mind and calmness and time pressure, as it looked like Hikaru, after knight f6, had the initiative. He probably was winning at some point. And what an incredible recovery there for Prag. He's on 9 out of 9. He beats Hikaru, ending his chances of winning the tournament, as we see Dubov defeating Fabiano Caruana. But Prag definitely not out of the woods just yet. He's got 2 more rounds, and he's got to do well in them, because there is going to be a pretty big group with 8 out of 9. Unbelievable. Or actually, maybe there won't be. Actually, Prag is over a point ahead of his nearest competitor. He's a point and a half ahead of Dubov, Indic, and Haik. But if Prag loses this next game, then things get incredibly sharp. But what an incredible performance, defeating Hikaru on demand in an incredibly sharp position. This is one of the most amazing performances we've seen in recent Title Tuesday. We've got a couple of games still going. Okay, this one is over. We have 2 grandmasters facing off, as Pablo Salinas, grandmaster from Chile, is about to win his game with the black pieces. And that is the last game of the round. Round 10 is upon us. Prag has 9 out of 9. And as we update the standings here, you can see that Dubov, Indic, Haik, Martirosyan have 7.5, and then there's a huge group with 7 out of 9. But the real question is, can Prag keep his lead over his nearest competitor? If he wins this game, he wins the tournament. because he's still going to be at least a point and a half ahead of his nearest competitor. But a draw, I'm sure, satisfies Pragg. Obviously, Haik Martirosyan is not going to just give him a drop, because the only chance for those people trailing Pragg is that he loses this game. And we have a Trompowsky opening. Pragg adopting a very solid setup. Usually the pawn comes out to f5, and then the knight goes to f6, clamping down on the e4 square. So let's see how Pragg sets up his pieces here. He is absolutely killing it here. This is an incredible performance. But can he finish it off? Can he top it off with at least a point in the last 2 games? Knight d7. This is looking pretty solid for black. Let's see. And c4. No, this actually looks pretty pleasant for white. This looks like a pretty pleasant position for white, because if you take on c4, knight e6, f e6, knight, these pawns are weak. White's queen is coming out to b3. I like the opening choice by Haik Martirosyan here. He seems to be slightly better for sure out of the opening in Pragg, taking his time. He does go for knight takes c4, so they're going to have that position on the board. Opposite colored bishops, yes, and that lends the position certain drawish tendencies, but white's definitely the one in the driver's seat. Pragg has a weak pawn on e6, a weak pawn on b7. His king a little bit flimsy. He's gotten a bunch of pawns pushed, so I think he's going to have to be very, very careful here not to let this spiral any further in the direction of white's advantage. Let's see. Rook c1. And white basically playing without risk here. White's position is so incredibly solid. I just don't see Haik losing this game if he continues to play solidly, but he can't afford to draw it. He has to win if he wants to give himself any chances. And even if Pragg's losing, even if Pragg loses, then he will still have a half-point lead over Haik Martirosyan and any others who win their game on 7.5. Knight f6. So he tries potentially to get his knight to d5 in order to blunt that bishop. Knight e5, Haik centralizing his own knight. I think we're going to see knight d5, and maybe white can reroute the knight to c5, although I feel like he just came from there. Oh, no, he didn't. Knight back to d7. Probably dropping the knight to d3 is a good idea here for white to keep his options open. He plays it. And rook fd8. Pragg continues to improve his position. This is still looking very solid for black. Nothing bad has happened yet. But now a choice for Pragg. Does he go e5? No, he goes knight back to f8. I would go h4 here. Yep, he does, in order to prevent g5 and secure that knight on f4. But e5 by Pragg, opening up the center. The only thing that concerns me about black's position here is his king. His king is pretty weak. He's got all these pawns pushed forward. But so far, I think Pragg has been doing a great job holding his own. It just doesn't seem like white's making too much progress in the direction of converting this initiative into something tangible. Bishop f3. Black's got a lot of ways that he can improve his position. Queen g7. You could drop the bishop back to f6 and then maybe get this knight around to e5. What's annoying about black's position is this queen on b3, continuing to pressure the b7 pawn. That's making it kind of hard for black to maneuver his heavy pieces around, because if black were to take on d1 and then go rook d8, of course he would end up dropping the b7 pawn. So Pragg has to kind of work around that. He goes king g7 and h6. Does he actually want to go g5? That would be a very, very risky move, because that would allow white to open up the h-file. I don't know if that's what Pragg wants. I think he's just preparing for the eventuality that white plays h5. Then he can play g5 while keeping the h-file closed. Haik taking his time, both sides down to 1.5 minutes on the clock. But Pragg, this tournament, has shown an incredible ability to survive even the most difficult positions in time pressure. And that's honestly what you need for Title Tuesday. But now I think he can take the opportunity to trade rooks and go rook d8. Now that the queen is no longer pressuring b7, black could take on d1. But what Haik wants, I think, is to play h5. And in the event of g5, the f5 pawn is going to become a very serious weakness that Pragg is going to have to deal with. So black can play h5 himself, but then, of course, you freeze your own pawn structure, and then the g6 pawn is weak. So a pretty unenviable situation here for Pragg. With dips below 1 minute, this is getting a little bit Maka-esque. Let's see what he chooses. He's got to make a move fast, though. This is just a little precarious, and b4 is also a possibility. White could start the pressure on the queen side, a minority attack, b4, a4, and b5. That didn't go anywhere. White is definitely still better, and he continues to bleed Pragg's clock. Let's see, knight e6. And now I would contemplate the move a4, maybe just a4 and b5, totally ignoring this knight on f4 is so well secured by all of white's pawns. e3 and g3 are both guarding it. And queen up to c4, forcing Prag to make a decision. He takes with the bishop. Now, even g takes f4 is possible because you can't take on h4. That knight on e6 is aimed at by the queen. But he plays e takes f4. He decides to open up the e file. He takes away from the center. The drawback is that he's given Prag this big square for his knight. I don't like that decision. I think Haik should have taken on d3, on f4 with the g pawn. But white is still better here. Rook e1 is possible. Maybe double rooks on the e file. Maybe go queen c5. A lot of possible weaknesses that white could attack here, and it's so easy to blunder if you're black. Your king is weak, your pawns are loose, your whole position is just a little bit flimsy, and all of it boils down to king safety. The fact that the 7th rank is so exposed makes this a hard position to defend for black, but so far, Prag has been doing a great job. I think he's got to bring his rook back to d7 in order to stop rook e7, and he does. Haik could consider playing h5 at some point and trying to soften up black's king side even further. Down to 30 seconds now is Prag. Queen d6, all hands on deck. He maybe wants to trade queens with queen e5. And Haik himself now down to 38 seconds, back to f6. Prag, of course, is more than happy with a repetition. There's no way Haik is accepting it. He gets his bishop to b3. Now knight takes b3, rook e7 check, loses the queen. What a trap. Incredible move by Haik. You can't take that bishop. Whoa, g5, Prag opening up his own king. This looks real dubious. I mean, he wants to counterattack white's king down the h-file. This is looking really, really dubious. I think after takes, and bishop e6 looks good. Even rook e6 looks good. Something's got to give here for black. He goes queen up to c5, preparing rook e7. This is so precarious now for black. Prag could get checkmated here very easily. Rook e6 or rook e7 check looks really strong. Black could end up losing all of his queenside pawns as well. He goes, oh, bishop e6. No, that's a terrible move. Rook e7. Now simply rook e7. If Haik had just gone rook e7 himself, he would have won all of black's pawns. Bishop e6 is inexplicable. He has to drop back. But now he gives Prag the chance to trade rooks, which he would die for. Now rook d7. Maybe rook e8, though. Still very dangerous. Goes rook up to e8. But b6 almost traps the queen. Oh my god. Rook g8 check and king queen f8 is sword. White is forced to trade queens now. And I think Prag is going to hold this game. This is an unbelievable recovery in a position which already seemed totally lost. Now the queens are off the board. Black is still slightly worse. White is more active. So Prag not out of the woods just yet. But he gets his king into the center. Is he going to hold a draw here? Okay, b5. Or even more. Now all three results are possible because white can end up losing his queenside pawns. Haik panicking here. They're playing for all three results. 4 seconds for Prag. King back a6, fixing the pawn on a7. King back to d6. I would throw in f4 if I was white. Just to fix black's pawn on f5. I would go f4 check right here. Rook b8. He's trying to go rook b7, which Prag is allowed. Oh, he's going to have to give up his pawn now. Prag's going to have to go rook d8. Oh my goodness, he's lost his pawn. I think he might lose the game now. Rook f7 check. Oh, and bishop e2 wins the piece, and Martirosyan is going to defeat Prag just when it seemed like Prag was on the cusp of saving the game. Martirosyan defeats him, and he blows the tournament wide open. Prag will not get a perfect score this tournament. He is still leading the field, but now his lead has shrunk to half a point. He basically will have to win his last round to guarantee a win in the tournament. As we saw Fabiano Caruana defeat Maxim Chagayev, we have Indic against Dubov. Dubov will have to mate with knight and bishop again. I think that's twice in the same tournament. Was it Dubov who had to do this the first time? We're definitely going to see knight and bishop for the second time, but I don't remember which grandmaster had to checkmate for a second time, and Indic is not even going to test him, which is totally fair. 9 seconds plus increment is more than enough time to deliver that mate. We have Hikaru and Conrad Holden. Hikaru is going to lose another game. Just a disaster here for Hikaru in this Title Tuesday, as he has lost several games. This is now going to be his third loss, and he is completely out of the tournament. Conrad Holden is a very nasty pairing, by the way. You think you have an easy game, boom, you're playing one of the strongest American blitz players. Conrad, not necessarily a household name for most people. Rook h6, by the way, would have been a forced rook trade, and Hikaru resigning his game. Just a very, very difficult tournament. Welcome to Title Tuesday. That's just what happens. Not Hikaru's day. He wins the first one, but the second one has belonged to Prag and the others. We have one last game going on. We have a knight and 2-pawn versus rook situation. Can white convert this into a win? I don't think so. King f7, king f5, rook f1 check. Because of the lateral checks, I think this is a draw. And this is, knight g5, king g8. King g8, king d5. Still some attempts here to be made for white, as the Georgian international master Supatashvili tries to convert this position. I think he's not going to be able to. This looks like a draw. Yeah. Key 6 or key 1. Okay, last game. And the final round, ladies and gentlemen, is upon us. Seatbelts fastened and mandatory. Will Prag be able to capitalize on an incredible tournament performance? King G6, by the way. Rook F1, still a draw. Still a draw. Rook E6 at Rook F1. And because of the stalemate, there's nothing that White can do. Because of the stalemate, there's nothing that White can do. White continues to make attempts here, but I just don't see him pulling this off. Whew. Okay. King F7. This should be a pretty easy draw at this point. White simply cannot make progress because of the threat of stalemate. And as we update the standings here, we've got 2 players on 8.5 out of 10. We have Dubov and Hayek Martirosyan, but Prag is not going to play either of them because he's already played them. So I wonder who Prag is going to play. He might get a slightly easier game on account of the fact that he's basically played everybody who's already at the top. And that might actually be pretty big. He's got Alexander Bortnyk, so not an easy game at all. Alexander Bortnyk is hungry for a win. He's on 8 out of 10. If Bortnyk wins this game, then most likely either Dubov or Hayek will win the tournament because they've got 8.5 out of 10. Huge game. Prag, with a victory in this game, wins the tournament. With a draw in this game, we will have either a shared first place between Prag and some others, or if neither Dubov nor Hayek is able to win their game, then Prag will still win the tournament with clear first in the event of a win. But I think Prag's going to be playing for a win. I don't think he's going to be playing for a draw here, especially after that last game. Let's see. DC5. So we have an Alpen Sicilian where Bortnyk grabs that pawn. We have a queen trade. This is a theoretical line where Black gets compensation because White's already lost castling rights and the E3 bishop is under some pressure. And the C5 pawn can often be won back by Black in the right set of circumstances. White's obviously going to cling to it kind of Slav style with B4, which we see in a lot of these Queen's Gambit accepted lines. Okay, Bortnyk is taking his time here. Perhaps he can go knight bd2. Now, the question for White is, does he want to give this bishop away on e3? He goes bishop b5. I think that's the correct move, actually, pinning the knight on c6. And now I think Prag is maybe going to take on e3. No, he's going to castle first. He's going to keep his options open. Bortnyk has to deal with the threat of discovered check. He can do that in several ways. He can move his king away, or he can cover it with his knight. Both options make sense. I really don't love this opening choice for White. I feel like in a blitz game, the kind of initiative that Prag has here, it's just easier to play Black. White has to constantly deal with threats. Now, of course, this will be justified if Bortnyk can find a way to cling to his extra pawn and consolidate his position. This is a big moment. How does Prag continue his initiative? Does he take the bishop? No, he goes f6. He's preparing to go e5 and expand in the center. He wants to drive that wedge into the center, restrict the knight on f3, and prepare to win the pawn back on c5. Bishop takes c6 by Bortnyk. There's a trade, and as we discussed, there's b4. So Black is not going to be able to win this pawn back anytime soon. That's it. White's queenside pawn chain is incredibly well defended. So Black's compensation stems from the fact that he's got the 2 bishops. White's pieces are incredibly passive, so it's all about whether or not White will be able to consolidate. Bortnyk trying to get his knights out of the game. I would throw in king b2 at some point to reinforce the c3 pawn. You definitely don't want to lose that pawn. There it is. And if you give Bortnyk a chance, he's going to go knight a3, knight c4. He's going to get his rook into the game. So Prag, this is a very concerning situation. He's got to find a way to keep the initiative going. And what exactly does he attack? He goes a5, he tries his best. Now, will Bortnyk go a3? Yes, he does. Prag could consider playing a4, trying to stop the knight from coming out to b3. But that pawn, of course, is going to end up being a serious weakness. And c4 is another idea by White to kick this knight off of d5. So the knight is not stable on that square. I actually like the way that this is going for Bortnyk. g6. Okay, so Prag probably wants to fianchetto and then play f5, e4 and get control of that long diagonal. I like that idea from Prag. I think he should even play f5 here. Okay, he goes e4, same idea. He wants to go f5 and bishop g7 and skewer White and devastate White over the long diagonal. Great idea by Prag to go g6. Very good practical concept. How is Bortnyk going to deal with that? See, there we go. There's f5. Bishop g7 basically going to be pre-moved, and Bortnyk might have to put a rook on c1 to passively defend the knight. He goes king b3, gets out of dodge. Okay, rook a c1 is possible. Prag has this massive bishop ensconced on d3. Now, no question in my mind that Black has full compensation for the pawn, and maybe even more than that. The last 5 moves have definitely gone in Black's favor, but can Prag actually convert this into something concrete, or can Bortnyk continue to consolidate his position? Both sides down below a minute and a half. We're entering the home stretch of bishop e5, hitting the pawn on h2. I think for Prag, he can consider pushing his king side pawns, maybe g5, f4, maybe h5, f4, just expanding on the queens on the king side. White is so incredibly cramped, pushed to the edge of the board. And at this point, I think Prag is not even going to take a draw. I think he's better, and he's up on time. Bortnyk's position is really, really precarious. Nerves of steel so far for Prag. He's doing really well. Bishop g3 is an idea, but maybe he wants to stick to the long diagonal. I would consider a move like h5, just kind of making a semi-waiting move, improving his position, and he plays it. And if Bortnyk allows it, he's going to go h4, and perhaps even a rook lift to g5 is on the cards. That g2 pawn is feeling really lonely. All of White's pieces are kind of clustered on the other side of the board. Now, Bortnyk could take on a5, but that would mean totally destroying the pawn structure and opening up the b file. Black puts a rook on b8, there will be held to pay knight a4. Bortnyk trying to get his knight to b6, which is a nice square, but that's not really a game-changing square. Prag could totally tolerate that and just move his king. So if I'm Prag, I would move his king, and then I would go h4 and really seriously consider the idea of the rook lift. So Bortnyk does take on a5. The reason he's done it now is because he thinks by putting a knight on b6, he's going to blunt the effect of Black getting a rook to b8, which makes sense. The other issue with b8, though, is that now his c-pawns are really weak, and Prag using his king to try to knock off that pawn. But Bortnyk says, no, you're not. He goes king b4. He's 2 pawns up currently, but you can see by the eval bar that it's not buying the way that Bortnyk is playing. This Prag getting his rook to e8. I think he's going to blast through the gates with f4. Then Black's going to have a massive pass, so this has to be almost winning for Black. I would consider going f4 right now if I'm Prag. He goes bishop g3 first. I think he's playing f4 on the next move. I think he's winning. f4 and then e3, and I don't think Bortnyk has the resources to stop the pawn. Bortnyk will have to give up either a piece or a rook for the e-pawn, and that means Prag will be completely winning. I think Prag is winning, and if he wins this game, he guarantees himself a win in the tournament. He takes f4, e3, Bortnyk's time is fading, e3 is coming, e3, e2, you can't stop the pawn, you have to give your knight up for it. He goes knight c1, one last attempt for Bortnyk. I think e2, e2, knight takes e2 though, you gotta be careful. How does Prag break through this last defense, this last bastion? How does Prag do it? Bishop e4 maybe? Bishop back? I don't see a move yet. He's down to 23 seconds. Can Prag find the knockout blow? What is it? Bishop b1. Bishop b1. Okay, so rook takes d8 is forced. And then after rook takes d8, rook e2. Rook e2. And now Bortnyk has found a way to blockade the pawn. But Prag obviously still in the driver's seat. His rook might be coming to d2. This is such a hard position to play with 10 seconds on the clock. Bortnyk gets his knight back to b8. Now rook b8 check is possible. But now king a4. And now there's no way to checkmate this king. This king is sandwiched on a4, but it's safe. And Bortnyk is getting his knight to b4. Oh my god, this is turning around. Prag down to 12 seconds himself. He's just hasn't found a way to break through. And now Bortnyk's knights are getting active. a6 is coming. Bortnyk is making progress. Now this has gotten really double-edged. It's anybody's game. Prag's still trying to go rook d2, still angling to get rid of this rook on e2. Bortnyk down to 5 seconds. King a5 maybe? Oh, he doesn't see a move. He's down to 2 seconds. He's got to move. Knight d5 check, sacrificing the knight. And Prag can take that with his rook, but then White has a gazillion passed pawns. Can Prag stop all of them? Rook takes d5, I think, is forced. I think he's got to take, and bishop d3. And d6 check. Here come Bortnyk's pawns. Whose pawns are first? a7. Oh my god. He's going to promote. I think White is winning. King b5. He goes g3, knocking the bishop off of f4. King b5 is possible. King up to b6. You don't even have to move this rook because the moment the bishop leaves the diagonal, White promotes. But how does Bortnyk make progress? He goes g4, tries to push his pawns on different sides. He's down to 0 seconds by 5. King a5. Oh my god, bishop c6, king back to b4. And I think Bortnyk's idea here should be to get his king to d3 and then sacrifice the rook for the pawn. And then all of his passers are going to be so overwhelming. He goes d7, e2, king e5, king d6. He's down to 2 seconds. c6 check. Prag's going to take it. Rook b1 was winning there on the spot. Rook b2. Rook e8 is going to promote. He's going to promote and win. Bortnyk is going to win. Or is he? Rook 8 shape. Prag trying to get to these 2 pawns, but king e5, king f5, and king g5. White's going to win. White's going to win. h3, king f6, and now just simply pushing the pawn, and Prag is not in time. He loses the last 2 games, and what a heartbreaker for Prag, who started 9 out of 9, but it looks like he will not be able to win this tournament. Let's see, and now all of it comes down to the Dubov game. Prag is praying that this game ends in a draw, because if this game ends in a draw, then Prag will still have shared first, and it does look like it's a draw, even though White is 2 pawns up. Rook g1 is a draw, and it looks like Prag might still get shared first despite a loss in the last 2 rounds. And for Dubov and Mkhitaryan, this is the worst result possible. And it looks like we're going to have a huge group with 9 out of 11. We're going to have a logjam at the top of the tournament standing. We have 5 players, and even Fabi managed to knock on the door. There we go. And we have our final standings fully defined. What an insane finale to that tournament. We got just a couple of games remaining. And once those games finish, the standings will be original, but none of the games remaining are going to impact the top of the standings. What a ridiculous finish as Alexander Bortnyk, improbably, he was already losing. It looked like you were shoveling dirt on him. That pawn was promoting in one way or another. He finds a way to stabilize, getting his knights into the picture. Knight d5 was brilliant. And wow, what an incredible finale to the tournament. Very upsetting for Prag, who will now have to settle for shared first. By tie breaks, it looks like Dubov is technically in first place. But of course, as we know, the prizes are shared. So for Prag, a disappointing finish, but he definitely, this is not the last Title Tuesday where he's going to be atop the standings. This is just the beginning, as they say. Okay, so the games are all over. We've got one last game between Tani and I am Obia Blanca. This is going to be a draw. And it looks like that's all. Okay, so Tani, okay, so this is a draw. And technically, Dubov is in first place by tiebreaks, and Prag has to settle for bronze medal by tiebreaks, with Haik Martirosyan surpassing him by tiebreaks with a 55 tiebreak score to Prague's 53.5. Just very upsetting for Prag. Couldn't pull out half a point in the last two rounds, but that's how it happens. Everybody is so strong in this tournament. Things can change in just an instant. So 9 out of 11, which is really rare, is the game tournament winning score. A log jam at the top with 5 players tied for first place. We've got Dubov, Haik, Prag, Alexander Bortnyk, and Fabiano Caruana, all with 9 out of 11. A big group with 8.5 that included Alexander Indich and several other grandmasters. We heartily congratulate our 5 winners. And of course, Prag was leading throughout the whole tournament. He defeated Hikaru, a performance where he's going to be holding his head up high. Wow. And the money will be split. What a Title Tuesday. A great, great second Title Tuesday of the day. And that means it's time for us to wrap up. This has been a phenomenal tournament. I greatly appreciate all of the activity in the chat, everybody watching and sharing your favorite player. I hope you enjoyed the commentary. This was breakneck pace, and this is exactly why we're here. We are going to raid Alexander Bortnyk, who is the very deserving recipient of the raid, one of the leaders of the tournament. So give Bortnyk your love. And I hope that you've enjoyed the coverage and the tournament. This was Late Titled Tuesday. I'm Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, and we will see you for Bullet Chess Championship tomorrow, bright and early. So much action coming your way this week. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for watching, and we will raid Grandmaster Alexander Bortnyk in just a moment here. Yeah, we will raid Alexander Bortnyk. And I'm going to do that right now. And once again, thank you everybody for the love and the support.